Our first presentation this morning is from Father Timothy Hojnicki, who's a pastor at Holy Apostles Mission in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. He's a 2002 graduate from the University of Delaware, where he received his BS in Family and Community Services. In May 2005, he received his MDiv from St. Tikhon's Orthodox Theological Seminary and was ordained to the holy priesthood later that year. He has taught liturgics and homiletics at St. Tikhon Seminary, as well as led many retreats and talks over the years. He also serves as an instructor in apologetics for the St. Raphael School. Father Tim also happens to be the priest of my family's parish in Mechanicsburg, so I'm a little extra excited to welcome him up as a speaker this morning on the topic of early life transitions. He'll be joined afterwards by a panel on transitioning from high school to college, joined by Kira Limberakis and Stephen Christoforou, both of whom we heard from yesterday, and also adding Demetrios Rentel, who is a senior at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, studying classics and Middle Eastern studies. In 2019, he worked as the OCA's project coordinator in the youth department, traveling from camp to camp the entire summer in an effort to assess in what state youth ministry was in America and what might need to be done, and continues to work with the OCA in determining how best to serve its youth and young adults. He hopes to graduate in June 2022. For now, please welcome up Father Timothy.
Grace, Reverend Fathers, brothers and sisters in Christ, glory to Jesus Christ. It's really a joy and an honor to be asked to speak at this conference. As I mentioned in the program, I was attendee at the second one. I was just kind of blown away by what they were trying to do with it and the ideas that were there. So to be asked to come and speak at this one, I was really kind of thankful for that. So thank you to the Orthodox Christian Leadership Initiative, the board, and the St. Vladimir's and Father Chad for hosting this wonderful thing yet again. Since this is the first time many of you have seen my face, hello, That's one of the weird things about these kind of situations now in our COVID, kind of culture that, that first conference I was at, it was neat because we could see people and connect with people. And now I was looking at the program, I thought, I don't know if I know that person. Like, oh, they were right next to me. I didn't see them, So it's one of these things we have to kind of overcome. This is my crew, my wife Anastasia, my kids Nicholas, Kira, Elijah, and Joachim. Keep an eye on the little one. Just to give you an idea of my family, this past week I was preparing my sermon for the Feast of the Elevation of the Cross, and I'm reading some things, writing down some notes. And Jojo comes up to me, he says, "Dad, I want you to say teeth in your sermon." Teeth? He goes, "Yeah, teeth." Okay, put it in the back of my mind. 5-year-olds, they do what they do. So I read the gospel, I come out to give my sermon, and I look over on the kleros, and there's Jojo laid out like this. I'm waiting intently. I'm thinking, okay, kid. So I do what I'm supposed to do, present my, I prepared on, and I thought, why not? And when you give a sermon, you're supposed to focus on something, but you have like 3 other things in the back of your mind that always are there in case you need to use them. And so right at the end of my sermon, I said, and the church gives us these important things to sink our teeth into. And I hear this squeal over from the kleros. He did it, he did it, he did it. So he comes up to venerate the cross at the end. He goes, "Dad, I heard you said it." Maybe the first time in the history of the Orthodox Church, a 5-year-old listened to a sermon intently. Not to be outdone, my 15-year-old standing next to me says, "That's real good, Dad. See if you can put Zamboni in your sermon this coming Sunday." So if anybody has any ideas how that could work, let me know. So just to give you an idea. But I mentioned my family in this because in this kind of ministry with college students coming into your parish, my family is all in. Those who have been to my parish know that my kids and the college kids, they interact. They challenge them to basketball. The kids challenge the college kids to basketball. They're helping my wife, with Jojo if he gets rowdy or whatever. And so my family, it's not just my ministry or the parish, but we're all in. It's all together. So I mentioned them. Just kind of mentioned the rap sheet of what I've done and kind of where I came from. Most importantly, though, my parish. I'm presenting today as a simple parish priest. I've been the pastor of Holy Apostles Mission since June of 2005. It was founded in 2004. I came a year later. We built our new building in 2016. And presently we have 52 kids, 12 college students in our parish. We have Dickinson College close by, Messiah University, Penn State Harrisburg is right across the river. So we have several colleges in the close area, so we always get somebody that comes every year. So I was asked to speak about this because we have a lot of college kids that come through our parish and kind of things we've done to kind of help welcome them and get them connected with the parish. So some ground rules. Feel free to stop and ask me questions to clarify things. I'm a fan of off-topic questions. It's kind of how my mind works. Sometimes like squirrel, we're over here, so it comes up something, ask away. And I get excited, when I get excited, I talk fast. So I'm excited about this, so I'm probably going to talk fast. So my wife usually is in the back of the church and she's doing my, that's kind of her thing. I've only seen this one time, which wasn't good, but so if I get too fast, just say, Father, slow down, So this morning's goals, what we're trying to do here is present kind of this no-brainer topic, right? How do we welcome college students into our parishes? We all know this is important. And then offer some ideas what we did as a community that have been successful, and then have this panel discussion afterwards to learn what has worked and what has not worked, and try to do this part in about 40 minutes or so and leave the rest of the time for the panel discussion. That's the plan. So the importance of this in our communities. Some studies report up to 60%. I've seen 60 to 66. Either one are terrible, right? Neither one is better. It's terrible. Up to 66, but I've seen 60% of kids who go off to college never return to church. They get this first experience of freedom, and it's easier to sleep in on Sunday and not do all these things, whatever. And at times of great stress and uncertainty, having a place to draw spiritual strength is crucial. And it's good for our people to provide the love and hospitality for the people that come to their doors. And I think it's interesting, too, because in our culture, we deal with this a lot. We have fitness trainers and diet coaches and mentors and whatever. But in the church, we have guidance built into our system, spiritual fatherhood and motherhood and all these different things that we have. And so when people come to us, how do we guide them in this transition in life going to the next phase? And so we have to kind of figure out, how do we make our communities places where people, especially college kids who come to us, encounter the living God. And I think that what happens often is we talk about this in terms of whose responsibility is this? Those people, right? They have to do this. Well, it begins with you and me, not them, but us. We have to do this. And so if God is sending them to us, it's our responsibility to do this. But not like a burden, like, oh, I got to do this. No, we should be welcoming these people as an outpouring of our Christian love and charity by default. And if we don't, that's a bigger problem, right? There's a telling of something more sick in the system. So, Father, we can't do that. I hear this all the time. I go around different places. We're too old, or we don't know this, or we don't whatever. Yes, you can. And Christ calls us to bring people to himself. No one's exempt from that. I don't care who you are. And in this case, specifically, these people God brings to our communities are who we're supposed to be welcoming. Now, I'm not saying you don't welcome anybody else, just college students. We're supposed to across the board. But for the purpose of our talk today, this is what it's going to be. And, I think it's important to realize that anyone can be called to do this in any context. So one of my favorite stories is my father-in-law, who's a priest. He'll be a priest of 60 years in a few weeks, the 24th, or this Friday, his anniversary. His father was Orthodox, and his mother was Jewish. And his father died early. His mother wasn't a practicing Jew, and so he would take himself to church and went to church. All the odds against him went to church. So eventually he goes to seminaries, ordained a priest, goes to Alaska for 30 years, builds a cathedral. But one side of his family is still Jewish. And so they came to visit us one weekend, and it was right after Pascha. Well, my Elijah at the time was maybe 3 or 4, and he just figured this part out where it's the only time you're allowed to yell in church, this Christ is risen thing. He loved it. And so he'd say it all the time. So whether it was at the checkout in the grocery store, to the librarian, to the mailman, Christ is risen, Christ is risen, Christ is risen, right? Well, Uncle Bernie comes in, right? Jewish Uncle Bernie. And Elijah starts, and Uncle Bernie, Christ is risen, Christ is risen, Christ is risen, Christ is risen. And Bernie just kind of, I said, he's not going to stop. And he goes, indeed. So even a 3-year-old can do this. Anyone can, right? But especially the people that come to our parishes. This is not just a ministry. I have an aversion when we talk about just ministries as certain things, as if it's opposed to anything else. All this is part of the life of the church. But this is the life of the church in action. We can talk about these things, but when people come to us, now we're really doing it. We're really enacting with people. And so many of these things we should be natural reactions. Of course we do this. But sadly what I found is it's not always, of course we do this. Sometimes there's aversion to it. Sometimes it's hard to come into parishes because people don't want that, or these young people are going to, stir the pot or whatever, or they're not like us, or they're sitting in my seat or whatever. I've heard this too many times. And so sadly, many people don't know this, and we need to help them see this and understand it. Now, first, I got to put all my cards on the table. My experience was not the college kid going into a parish and trying to figure out where I'm going to fit in, whatever else. When I was in college, I was the parish council president of my parish. I was a member of the Diocesan Council of Eastern Pennsylvania. I was a full-time student at the University of Delaware, and I had a job at a DuPont credit union. So that is not my experience at all. I was the one that kind of was saying, we need to welcome these other college students, because they're coming into our parish. So I will admit wholeheartedly that I'm kind of an anomaly in this. So I'm not normal in that sense. Well, we can go and talk about it another time. So one of the things that I realized early on, especially when I was, kind of on the leadership role in our parish, is how do we make this community a place that's welcoming for these people to come into? And that's hard. It's an interesting thing that we were hearing this the other day about, when you see people, you can see some talent or something and cultivate them and draw that out and encourage them. I realized at this conference that that's what happened to me. People in my parish saw an 18-year-old kid and said, hey, you're eligible and you do things in the life of the church. Why don't you run for parish council? It's like, I can do that? And so there's this, 70-year-old guy who's been the parish council president for time immemorial, and then me, and they actually voted me to be the parish council president. He wasn't happy about that, but but it just said something about people in the parish that did what we were talking about and how it works. And so when I was on the parish council, I said, okay, we need to figure out to make sure that this parish is a place where when people come to it, they feel safe, welcomed. And so we have to make sure our parishes are a place of peace. If there's all kinds of arguing and bickering and God knows whatever else, they're going to see this and be affected by it. We can't talk about being the true faith and everything else when we're hating each other and screaming and yelling about stupid things. And it happens. And so, I think one of the things I heard one time was the annual parish meeting where the contentious vote on the priest's salary was coming. Oh, you guys should stay for the meeting. No, you shouldn't. Go home. There's certain things we need to kind of protect them from. They're not ready to see that yet. And make sure that if it's a drama-ridden place, why would you want to come there? Some of our own people don't want to come, let alone people that are visiting us. And keep an eye on who they're interacting with. One of my favorite stories when I was in college is that, this one college student was coming for the first time and experiencing everything, wanted to become a catechumen. An older gentleman came up and says, why the heck do you want to be Orthodox? It's so hard. You could be something else, it'd be a lot easier. The only reason I'm Orthodox is because I was born into it. I was horrified. Like, get away from this man, It's like, stop, but we have these people. And so we got to make sure if our college students are there, who are they interacting with? What is the best representation of the Orthodox Church? And the ones that aren't, we say, there's something in the closet here, and shut the door and leave them in there. It's sad we have to think this way, but it's happened. I've seen it. And so sometimes people can just be mean. That's my chair, get out. Well, come on. We use these things as kind of anecdotal stories, but they're true. They've happened. And so I always say there's nothing worse than an ugly Christian, right? If we say, love one another is like kind of our MO as the church, and we don't do it, God help us. I talk to people all the time. I say that, we're walking billboards for the kingdom. If we say one thing and do the other, people take note. If they know you're a Christian, they're watching you, how you're going to respond to something. And so we got to be careful when people are visiting us, especially college students who are impressionable, or trying to figure this stuff out. how do we welcome them properly and have a good setting and environment for them to be in? Okay, so I offer a few ideas that have worked for our parish. Now, I have to say from the get-go of this that this is not magic, right? These are not fail-safe. Not everything will work in every parish. Simply put, these are things that worked for us, and so I'm just sharing them. And so you can say, that didn't work for us. Fine, that's true, probably. But these are things in our parish that in the last 15 years or so have been very effective. So the first thing we do towards the end of the summer every year is we put out a sign-up sheet of people who want to be a part of this Adopt a College Student program. People in our parish will sign up, and so they'll be in charge of, we'll assign them one of the students. And so their idea is to kind of keep their eye on them. When they see them in church, they know who they are. They can sit with them. A coffee hour, they know they have some they know. We give them a survey, the college students, like, what do you like, dislike, what's your favorite snack, what's your feast day, if they're Orthodox, that kind of thing, birthdays, whatever. So we can make a connection with them and remember these events in their lives. And so this person will then check in with them, make sure they need okay, if he rides, make sure that a connection with someone that they know at the church so they don't come as a stranger not knowing anybody. There's some people that are kind of extroverts that can walk into a situation, it doesn't matter. They'll just say, hey, how you doing? Good to see you. Not everybody's like that. I'm a forced extrovert, right? On Sunday, I'm on, right? I got to do my thing. But I would much rather be sitting in the corner drinking my cup of tea just watching everything. And so when I come home from church on Sunday, everyone knows I sit in my chair for a half hour. Don't talk to Dad. Just let me just be quiet, in silence for a half hour, and then we'll talk about who said what to Matishka, the message you have to tell me, and blah, 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 blah. But sometimes when people come in, they're anxious about where do I go, who do I sit with. So to have somebody they know makes a connection and makes it a little bit easier. So once they're there and we know who they are and they're part of the parish, we give them a welcome basket. We put a parish directory that has everybody's names and addresses and phone numbers. This year we're actually doing a photo directory so people can actually see it. The church has gotten big enough that we can't remember everybody's names. The priest can't remember his names. So we have to see everyone, know who they are. We put a recent newsletter so they kind of know what's happening in the life of the parish. I write a letter of welcome personally saying, hey, welcome to our community. I'm the father of this family. Welcome to, you're part of it. An icon or a prayer book, and then some goodies to say, this is a gift from us. We're happy that you're here. And then to kind of solve the problem of how they get there, we try to provide rides for them. They don't have cars. Remove any excuse not to come. It's easy to say, oh, well, I couldn't do this, and I slept in. Well, there's a car out front. Merp, merp. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, if they know you're coming. And give them consistent times to be picked up. It'll be every Sunday at 9 o'clock on this corner, because church starts at 9:30 and blah, blah, blah. We include them at fellowship events. We make sure, like, if we have like a fire pit night at church, that, we have rides that bring them to and from. And be sensitive about getting them back with their schedules. What happens sometimes in churches is, like, I think I mentioned the other day that we become like Sunday parishes, because everything happens on Sunday because, most of us don't have communities anymore. We have commuteries, right? Everyone drives in. We don't walk to church anymore. And so it's, sometimes everything happens, and so it's late in the afternoon by the time we go home. Some of these kids have stuff they got to do. And so I try to encourage people that, if they don't want to stay, make sure, get them back in time. I'll embarrass him, but Mike Merton, who's here, was one of the guys that I tapped last year and said, hey, we need help. There's 3 people that in our parish that were going to drive people to the church. And, coming from where Mike lives to pick up the kids and go to church, it was not on the way. It was out of the way. But faithfully, he did it because he knew this is important. Actually, funny story, one of the riders for tomorrow kind of canceled. So I said yesterday, Mike, can you do it? He said, yes, of course. So he's doing it. So he's consistent. But it's an important thing to make sure they have a way to get to and from. And when they don't come to church, we have the famous first question in the Bible, Adam, where are you? It's good to ask, where were you? I missed you, but not to be all up in their face about it, because then they get kind of territorial or whatever. So it's this fine balance by saying, hey, I missed you last week, but not saying, where were you? Where do we find that middle line between it? Make them feel that they were missed, they're welcome, we love them, but not be so kind of inundated, we're kind of all up in their stuff. And even when they do come, this reminds me of something else I didn't put in here, but give them space, right? We are an intimidating church from someone who comes from the outside, right? So if you ever have college students come to your parish for the first time, never experienced an Orthodox service before, it's kind of, well, for me, it's kind of funny to watch, because they just kind of, you know, we're used to this. I was raised in this, so, you know, candles, incense, censers, whatever, vestments. But they walk into this space that are, with pictures staring at them, you know, the guy in floor-length brocade swinging a flaming purse with everything on fire, right? This is kind of, you know, culture shock to a lot of these people. And sometimes we want to be so helpful to say, you know, oh, here on this page and everything else. And one of my parishioners, he's so like, on the spot to kind of help, but sometimes I say, back off. Don't turn the pages for them. Like, just let them, you know, they have to experience it and just kind of take it in. Because sometimes I think we get so used to it, we don't think of how people coming in for the first time, how it's just kind of, you know, it's powerful. It's overtaking sometimes. Feed them. You know, Orthodoxy always has food involved, you know, always. And so fellowship hour is pretty standard in parishes. COVID aside, I don't know what the restrictions are in your local parish, but don't charge them for food. One of my pet peeves as a priest and as a dean is when I go to parishes, there's a basket at the coffee hour table. That just infuriates me. You know, if I went to Father Chad's house for dinner, at the end he wouldn't slip a bill across the table and say, thanks for coming, you know, $49.95. I mean, that'd be insulting. We think that's ridiculous. But we do this in churches sometimes, you know? And for a bagel and a cup of coffee, pass the hat. Come on. So I was visiting a parish one time, and it wasn't my parish, and the college kids were coming through, and I was kind of aghast that, you know, the lady said, well, that'll be at $2.50. I'm like, give them their donut and their cup of coffee for crying out loud. I mean, really? Is that really worth it? And so don't charge them for things. And if there's leftovers of coffee hour, pack it up, send them home with them. College kids are always hungry, right? Make sure they leave full. In our parish, we don't just have coffee hour. Every Sunday, 3 families take the coffee hour, and so they make a meal. And so it rotates. People take maybe once every 8-9 weeks it goes through because people take turns. And so we feed about 150 people every Sunday. And the leftovers, we try to send it home with the college kids, you know, because they're going to be hungry. They're going to need it. They're going to, you know, they're always hungry. And so it's an important thing. When you have parish events, we sponsor them. I don't know many college kids that have extra money, right? And so when we have parish events, people sponsor them with free tickets. Once a year, we have our annual dinner, dance, and silent auction. It's coming up in a couple weeks. It's an Alice in Wonderland thing this year. And so what people will do is they'll buy extra tickets, give them to me, and says, give these to the college kids. And so, can you come? Here's a ticket. So they don't have to pay the $50 or whatever for a ticket. They can just come and enjoy the time and the fellowship with the parish. And it's kind of funny, this is kind of caught on. I have a bishop friend of mine who every year does this. He sends a donation and he goes, give it to one of your college kids. You know, so to make sure that they can participate with everyone. Other special parish events. You know, college night with the Archbishop. We have a parishioner who has a really large house that has kind of a suite off to the side that when the bishop comes, he stays there because it's, you know, it's comfortable, it's private, whatever else. And so this person had an idea. They said, well, why don't we have a dinner with the Archbishop at the house and just invite the college kids so they can get to know the bishop, you know, on a personal level. It's a great idea. And some of these kids have never seen a house blessing before. They said, well, why don't you do the house blessing with the bishop there? I said, yeah, plus the boss sees me do my job. Wonderful, let's do that. But it's nice for them to get to know the bishop. Your Grace, with respect, sometimes bishops are very intimidating, right? And they come in with their staff and their veil, and, you know. I remember a couple of years ago, one of the college students, I wanted to introduce them to our bishop, and, you know, I didn't think ahead of time to prepare them for this. And so the bishop comes out of the altar, and I come over and said, you know, Your Eminence, this is so-and-so, and the guy kind of went, Your Majesty, you know. I'm like, what are you doing? He's, I don't know. And the bishop's looking at me, like, okay. You know, so it's like, you know, now have dinner with him. And he was, you know, he connected with them. He loves Tolkien. They love Tolkien. They were talking about it. It was like, you know, very personable. It was good. You know, so Your Majesty, good to have you with us. But one of our other parishioners has a college student dinner that every so often on a Friday night or a Sunday night, they invite all the college kids to their house and just make them dinner. And have a great time of fellowship and kind of hanging out and meet some people. Just to get to know people in the parish. Give them appropriate jobs. make them feel useful. Invite them to sing, chant in the services. As we mentioned before, that's not always a given. Sometimes they're not welcome to do those things. Serve in the altar if appropriate. Help with fellowship hour. I have one young lady now that, she always wants to help clean up coffee hour. It's like, are you sure? Yeah, I want to help. Okay, don't tell them, clean the toilets or something. But jobs that are appropriate. Make them feel part of the parish. One college student told me one time, I was really kind of moved by this. They said, the church gives us so much, we really don't give anything to it. I said, you don't realize how much you're giving just being here and letting us, serve you. It's important. This one might get me in trouble, but, what language we all speak in here? I'm an OCCF parish. We had the language battles back in the 70s. Most of our parishes are all English speaking now, but I've gone to places where I have no idea what's happening and who's talking and what's going on. And you'd think this is a no-brainer, speak in a language people can understand. But I've been in situations where someone's talking Russian or Greek or whatever, I'm standing there like, okay, I'll just stand here until we're done because I have no idea what we're talking about. If the new person is coming in, they don't understand what people are saying and they're talking in a different language, they feel ostracized by that. We got to be conscious of that. We don't sometimes meet it on purpose, just like our default setting. And especially, I would say, in the services. I do a litany in Slavonic or Greek every week just because I have Russians or Ukrainians off the boat and Greeks and that kind of thing. Fine, nothing wrong with a little litany here and there, whatever. But if we do big parts of our services in another language and we're welcoming people to experience the fullness of Orthodoxy, they have no idea what's going on, that's a problem. Hate mail is coming now, as we know. This one really kind of moved me. This past year we had two guys that joined the parish. They came in, became catechumens, and they were brought into the church on Pascha. And in the Slavic tradition, we have this tradition of the Pascha basket, where, whatever things you abstain from during Lent, you then put those in the basket, bring to the church, we bless them, and then we have the agape meal after with those foods. Well, these kids had never experienced that before. So one of the ladies in the church during Holy Week says, come with us, after one of the services. They went to the local supermarket and says, pick out whatever you want. And they picked out, meats and cheeses and chocolates and whatever else and made their basket for them. When they came, they were so proud, They were guy baskets. It wasn't like arranged nice at all, just like thrown in there. But still, my wife has ours, has like the embroidered cover and the candle and the beautiful thing. You don't want to eat it because it looks so nice. But they were so proud of their basket. And this lady, it wasn't something she was told to do or say, we need to do this. She took it upon herself to say, you know what, they've never experienced this before. I'm going to make sure their first Pascha is special. And they did. During finals week, we give each student a care package, goodies and snacks and school supplies and whatever else. Again, I write a letter of encouragement saying, you can do this, this is the end's in sight, assuring them of our prayers for them. Notes of care from parishioners that write, for the ones that know them, instead of noting and say, hey, good luck with everything, we're rooting for you. And even our own college kids who are away at college, we send them a care package to make sure they're remembered too. It's this whole idea of relationship and connection, so important. And so, communication. I always marvel that as the church that confesses the Word of God, the divine logos of the Father, that we're awful at communicating. This should be like our MO, but we're just terrible at it. And so I try at all levels to kind of email people and text them, social media, and the college kids especially, weekly check-ins. Hey, how's things going? College doing okay? How's your, studies going? Whatever. And make a point at coffee hour to kind of connect with them. And this has to be deliberate. If we're kind of passive about it, they can slip through the cracks. People can sense when they're not important to us. It's just like, oh, yeah, they're there, whatever. People also know when they're identified, and they're seen, and they're heard, and they're missed. We got to really step up our game to make sure we're connecting with them, that they know that they're welcomed, that they're loved, and they're, we're happy they're there. And not just in the parish. Sometimes we have to also have a presence on the campus. It's easier for us to go to them sometimes with all their schedules and whatever else. And so, Messiah College or Messiah University, now they just got upgraded, they have this thing called a liturgical chapel, which means nothing of what you think it means. I was kind of scandalized by that the first time. And they, they invited me to come. The first week I was in Mechanicsburg, I was invited to come to Messiah University for a chapel, and the topic was human sexuality. I'm thinking, what did I get myself into? So I show up to this offering of these 50 kids that just signed up to come to this chapel. We had a compline service or something, and then they said, "Can you serve a liturgy?" I said, "In 45 minutes?" Nope. And so the topic was the Orthodox view of human sexuality. And I'm thinking, okay. And so these kids come in and, they're looking at me kind of strange, like, what's this Catholic guy going to tell us about, sexuality? And I'm thinking, So just to begin, I'm married and have a child on the way to begin, Broke the ice, then we had a conversation about it. But every so often they had these things with different themes, and then they asked me to come and serve a service, then we have a topic discussion. And so I try to keep my foot in the door. The latest one we had was a conversation between, don't laugh, about a minister, a rabbi, a minister, an imam, and a priest, something that became a bad joke. And they wanted everyone to come together and give their opinion on who Jesus Christ is. Well, the minister canceled for some reason. The rabbi, said that, we're not, he's nothing really to us, whatever. The imam said, well, he's, a prophet, and they came to me, and I'm thinking, I got a Protestant audience. They said, well, he is the Lord. He is the second person of the Trinity. He's God incarnate. And the police start cheering and everything else, hyping it up. And from that, we had people that came to the next chapel. They wanted to hear more about what we believe about, the Trinity. The imam was not pleased, but whatever. And so when classes are offered, they actually came to me and they said, would you give a class on the feasts of the church? I said, you're asking me to do this? I said, yeah, so okay. And so we had, a bunch of kids that came and we talked about the feasts of the church. And, I had the icon there and explained the history, read the scripture. Scripture is very important. And then they would come to church afterwards because of it. Hosting OCCF events on campus, of course. I have to say, though, OCCF for me is a difficult ministry. I feel like Sisyphus sometimes because, you spend all this time and effort for 4 years and then, whoop, back to the beginning. Develop these relationships that take time and effort and energy. And sometimes, after they graduate, they go somewhere else. The beauty of it, though, is it blesses somebody else. Our parish has been blessed by the ministry at State College. 3, 4, 5 families of people that, were students there, baptized there, that ended up in our area. And they're some of my best parishioners. They tithe, they come to all the services, they fast, they pray, they're kind to people, they do all these things I've been telling you about. And it starts from another parish that kind of send them our way. So even if in our ministry we do this and we send them off somewhere else, someone's benefiting from this if we do our jobs right. Okay, some final thoughts before I get the hook. When I was 11 years old, my grandfather was teaching me how to ride a bike. And as he was running behind me, as you teach kids how to ride a bike, and eventually you let go and let them kind of do their thing. And I was doing it. And I turned around and I said, "Grandpa, how am I doing?" Well, I didn't see the 3 trash cans on the side that I went into and went over the handlebars. I have a scar on my arm still from that. If I was worried about what I was doing, I would have been fine. When I got too concerned with how am I doing, I got all tripped up. I think often in the life of the church, we get so concerned with how are we doing? Is this working? Is it better than last year? It's much better than 10 years ago. But we're not worried about what we're doing right now. I had somebody lament. They said, we only have 1 college kid in our parish, and we should be doing this or that. I said, focus on that 1 college student. That's who God has given you. Focus on that. And so rather than focus on just how we're doing, focus on what we're doing. And finally, there's a story I love of these 2 boys. They're twins. One was an optimist and one was a pessimist. And the eternal optimist and the eternal pessimist. Nothing good would make the pessimist happy. Nothing bad would make the optimist come down. And so they wanted to do a study on these 2 to find out what makes them tick. And so they took the pessimist, this little boy, and put him in a room that had every toy you can imagine. Because, superhero characters, video games, board games, everything you can imagine. Say, okay, put him in there. It's got to be good for him. There's going to be something happy for him. And they took the optimist and put him in a room that had 4 feet of horse manure in it. Right? And they wanted to watch what these kids were going to do. Well, after a while, they hear the pessimist crying. Like, what in the world is this kid crying over? I mean, he's got everything he would possibly want, a kid would want. And so they look in the room, and he's sitting there crying because, he's saying, oh, the toys, if I play with this, it's going to break, and if I do this, I'm going to lose, and this is going to be broken. I can't touch any of this stuff. And they're thinking, ugh. And as they're doing this, they hear in the other room with the 4 feet of horse manure, the Optimist just laughing and carrying on, having a great time. They're thinking, what in the world is that kid doing? They peek in there, and he's got a shovel. He's just slinging manure everywhere and, just giggling. And they said, son, what are you so happy about? He said, well, with all this horse manure, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. And I think we need to be the eternal optimists when we look at this kind of stuff. That sometimes it can seem pessimistic, oh, there's no hope or whatever else. There's always hope. We are the eternal optimists as the church. No one saw Good Friday as anything good, but that brought about the salvation of the whole world. So even when things are difficult or things look bleak, we always have to keep a positive outlook on things. We have to, because if we don't, who will? And the whole world kind of falls. So before we get to a panel discussion, are there any questions about some of the things that I put forth?
Thank you, Father Timothy. I do have a question. With your adopted students,
Yeah.
do you go through any kind of a vetting process or an invitation process, or is it kind of a free-for-all? Because
Which side of the...
Of those who are adopting the students.
Yeah, I mean, I know my parishioners well enough to know if someone's going to commit to something, they're going to actually commit to it. And so we kind of do our homework during the summertime and talk about it. We have different events that we kind of sit down and say, hey, would you be interested in this? This is what we require. Are you willing to do this? If I know there's a problem that probably wouldn't be a good thing, I can kind of put the veto on it. But yeah, there's definitely quality control, because you don't want to have one person who buys a kid a Lamborghini, the other one forgets about him. Make sure that we're doing the same things, so we're fair. Yeah.
Father, thank you so much. I'm so impressed by your parish. Do you have, does your parish have a youth director, or do you have a youth young adult committee? I mean, who is, besides yourself, who is helping spearhead this? Because
Hi,
it really...
Nice to meet you. Yeah. This is an OCA parish, it's like...
Right, okay.
Priest,
but do you have a committee?
Council.
Are there volunteers who help you with the baskets and the care packages? Because it just sounds like a lot.
My wife, she organized some of the ladies that kind of get together and put the baskets together. There's 10 or 15 people that are involved in all this. The job of the priest in a parish is not to do everything. The job of the priest is to make sure everything gets done. And so I'm blessed in my community that I have people that are capable, and I can say, hey, let's do this, give it to somebody, and let them run with it. I don't micromanage, I don't have time. This dinner dance that's coming up in a couple of weeks, they want to know, Father, should the napkins be pink or rose? I don't care, ask me who's going to give the blessing that day. I'll tell you if the bishop's coming or not. That's all I need to worry about. You do the rest. And I think that if you get the right people involved in it, they make it their own thing. They make it they're excited about it. I don't have to push anyone to do this. They want to do this. And they really take ownership of it. And the nice thing I didn't mention here is that afterwards, there's some kids that have graduated and gone off. They still have connection with these people years later. They come home for feast days and that kind of thing. And actually gets me in trouble because sometimes they want to come home for Pascha, and their parents are like, what about us? Sorry. Father?
Father, how do you learn about new college students that are coming into your area? As you're talking about different institutions, right? How do you discover that there are college students coming?
It's a mixed bag. Most of the people, they contact me ahead of time, or I'll get an email. I'm interested in this Orthodox church. Can I come to something? Sure. Sometimes Messiah College isn't very big, so kind of know who's coming in. And I think there's a religious studies survey or whatever else, and they kind of connect people with different churches in the area, and we're on that list. But it's not one thing. It just happens, sometimes by accident, sometimes deliberately. I just was told the other day there's a student in one of the local colleges that is the daughter of an Orthodox deacon that hasn't shown up yet. I thought, search and rescue, I'll go find her, Yeah. And so, that's the other thing too, that sometimes, people like that freedom and they're not going to come. You can't force it.
Hi, good morning. I know you all missed my comments. I would like to encourage all of you, because of that question, to know that OCF does have a concerted effort that I would encourage you all to actually participate in every year of gathering the names of your graduating high school seniors. If you tell us in the summer and the spring who's leaving your parish and where they're going to college, and at least an email address for them, we ensure that those lists then get passed on to the Father Timothys, who they're going to school near, and the OCF leaders on those campuses. Unfortunately, we have about 2,000 parishes in the United States and Canada, and we usually get about 300 names from 2,000 parishes. So this is a big, this would be a much easier task for the Father Timothys of the world, or all of you, to reach the college students if, as they're leaving your communities, you make sure that OCF knows where they're going. Even if they go somewhere where there's not a chapter, we guarantee that an OCF regional leader then will reach out to them within 40 days of being on campus. So I'm just putting a little plug for that. If you want to learn more about how that works or how to submit names, it's never too late. We want to know about them. You can just come find me later. Okay, that's my plug.
Father Timothy, Sean Labatt here. I wanted to commend you for your concern with safety within Parish Life. When I was 18 through 21, I was one of those very involved college students. I was in a parish that was spiritually, emotionally, and physically not safe. So I really want to commend you for your concern for that and for having a plan for safety for the generations to come. Thank you.
I know we want to have time for our panel discussion, so maybe this last question from Brian and Carolyn online. They said, what if you don't live in a college town but you live near one? How do you advertise on campus to attract students to your parish?
That's a good question. Part of what we do is word of mouth. Sometimes, people are so connected these days with social media and whatever else. Not being able to get a message to somebody now, it's almost, I don't want to say inexcusable, but you can connect with people so easily now that you couldn't maybe 10, 15 years ago. So I think that, people are connected enough that they can get the word out if they need to. There's different message boards in colleges, and even secular universities have a religious poster board of different services, whatever else. If they're looking, they'll find it. But it's a hard thing. None of this stuff is this is the way to do it or else. There's so many different ways of doing things, and trying to find them to come is part of the hardest part. We've been blessed that someone knows somebody who brings them or offers a ride or whatever. So I really haven't done much of that because they're coming to us. But in that situation, that would be a lot harder. Any other questions? Sure. Could our panelists please come forward? So first, thank you three for agreeing to do this. It's wonderful to have you. I'm honored that you agreed to it. As people that are involved with, college students, young adults, and that kind of thing, I want your kind of opinion on some of these things. One of the questions I was asked was, what was most helpful for you in college to help you stay connected? Whoever wants to go first.
I didn't when I was in college. So I think maybe that's helpful sometimes to reminder, just to give ourselves a little bit of grace. Sure. That the story is long, and certainly we want to work hard as hard as we can in any particular life stage. But I wasn't particularly connected in college until later. But that was also probably more a question of inexperience than a particular sort of outreach or ministry. So I don't know. Life is weird. Even if we're struggling with ministry during high school or struggling with keeping people faithful during college, the story is long, right? Frodo and Sam are on Mount Doom, and they know that it's this dark period in a much larger story, So I don't know.
It's good.
Makes sense.
Sure. As someone who's still in college, there's a lot. My story is kind of unusual, perhaps, like yours, Father, except in the opposite way. my freshman year, I wasn't very connected with the parish, and there were problems on both sides, the parish and then with myself. But ultimately, I ended up switching to go to another parish my sophomore year that was an hour away. And it was very hard to be involved, and it was hard for people to see me because I could only ever go up for Sundays for Divine Liturgy. I don't have a car. But I still appreciated doing it simply because it's an opportunity to go to church. You know, it's important. But the people there at this church were so wonderful, so loving. They made the effort to get to know me, even though I was a pretty small investment in terms of parish life. You know, I could only ever be there for 2.5 hours every week for Divine Liturgy, and then for an hour at coffee hour, when often I would be so overwhelmed I would just kind of go back in the corner. But people came to me, which is so wonderful, so helpful. So, and that continues to happen right now, which is fantastic.
Kira?
So I'll say too, I mean, you know, my experience in college certainly wasn't perfect in terms of, you know, really serious engagement. It ebbed and flowed. But there were two things that were really important for me in my spiritual development and staying connected to the church. One was my college did not have an OCF chapter, and I was really involved in the campus itself with a cappella and campus ministry and other things. But I always did the national events. So I always went to college conference, I did Real Break, and that was tremendous, especially college conference. I had the opportunity, I went to Crossroads when I was in high school, and then I got a chance to see all these other Crossroads alums and meet so many amazing Orthodox Christian college students. So I'm gonna give a big plug for college conference. It really made a big difference for me. But then secondly, and I know this might like seem scary to some people here, but I went to a Catholic university, and I got really, and I got involved in campus ministry, and that was really important for me, just finding Christian friends in college who, you know, I was a part of their retreat program. I did some of their, you know, alternative spring break, like habitat trips, so plug for Habitat for Humanity, in addition to Real Break. And I do think that made a difference, that I at least had a community of people at my school who understood that I was a person of faith and didn't, you know, bat their eyes when I said I was going to church on Sunday. And so I do think that, you know, if you have college students who are attending a school where there might be some ministry opportunities just to be around people of faith, I really encourage that of our students. And then of course, if there's an OCF chapter and there, you know, are Orthodox things happening, of course to engage with those. But that it's beautiful to be, like, my friends learned a lot about Orthodoxy through my participation in retreats, and yeah, so I would really encourage that.
Oh, can I share one more thing?
Sure.
Actually, in retrospect, so like, these are all wonderful. There was an opportunity that I had when I was in college, which I think it didn't really connect with me at the time, but actually is something that has been on my mind since. When I got to college, there was this sweet old lady that the priest assigned to drive me to church on Sunday mornings. And I went with her like once or twice, but probably 90% of the time I was too hungover on a Sunday morning to go with her, so I never went. So, you know, like, it's to my great shame, like, it's been so long ago and I don't even remember her name, and I hope to see her again at some point. But it's like, she was faithful to me, right, to your point about just like faithful people. She was faithful to me, even when I wasn't faithful to her little sacrifice of showing up every morning at 8:30 at this particular intersection. Because again, the story is long, right? I feel like as the people who are the church, to build on the attachment stuff we were talking about yesterday, we can at the very least like be the ones who initiate, even if the college students at that moment are too hungover to,
Sure.
you know.
We go to the microphone.
Okay, so we talk a lot about undergraduates. Are these programs and resources like Crossroads and Orthodox Christian Fellowship do they also consider those that are in graduate school that may be, so law school, medical school, people who are in grad school, or is it specifically for undergraduates?
So for Crossroads, some of the alumni initiatives that we put on, we have like our 30-year-olds come to our retreats and engage in our ministries. For OCF, Christina, I feel like you might be, I know graduate students can definitely participate, but there is an age limit, right? What is the cap?
For the sake of when we bring people together from across the country for national programs or retreats, our age range is 18 to 25. So it sometimes includes graduate students or students who take more than 4 years. But a local chapter really needs the discernment of we trust the discernment of like a spiritual advisor on what level of graduate student participation is still appropriate for, the 18-year-olds figuring out their way, versus like when a graduate student who might be older or coming back to school might need to be transitioned into another ministry.
Thanks. So, my question's back up here. What about deterrence? What are the things that say, the president got up, I have to defer.
Carry on.
As you wish.
This has been kind of actually a trip down memory lane for me. I spent 8 very happy years as the OCF sponsor at Kansas State University. I still have my purple OCF jacket. My 2 sons, by the way, are graduates of the University of Kansas, and they can't stand it when I put that purple jacket on. But one of the things in listening to this that I thought I would throw out is I found that Orthodox professors and people who may have worked in administration, secretaries, other people, they were extremely helpful to me because, and I spent a lot of time focusing on them because I had professors who would say, oh, this is great, but I haven't the slightest clue how to work with Orthodox students, what's my role as a professor. Once I got them excited about it and got them involved, they opened doors for me, the complications of getting the proper license at the university so you can advertise, all of those other kinds of things. So that's just a thing I'd throw out there is when we're focusing on the students, don't forget the people that work at the universities, particularly the professors, because also in terms of succession, I can say that after I left, those professors actually helped in the transition. So that's an important part of this as well.
Thank you, Father. So we talked about things that were helpful. What about deterrence? What things well, Steve, you kind of said what are the deterrents, but what things kept you from church? What things said, I don't want to do this? What things kind of turned you off to getting involved in parish life?
There are some really wonderful people involved in church ministry. At the risk of offending people, there are some who, a little less so.
Very diplomatic, very nice. You're Rentel for sure.
In order to talk about the terms, it's difficult. Again, my freshman year, it was very rough. I was transitioning so I grew up here, St. Vladimir Seminary. My father still teaches here. And I ended up going to a very rural town in Minnesota, very, very much the exact opposite of a suburb of New York City. The seminary campus is, the small liberal arts college that I currently go to. And I was struggling with that. I was struggling, new milieu, the new atmosphere, environment, people, culture. But I knew that there was, Orthodox Church. I've been raised in the faith, obviously, and I have a good time when I go to church. So I knew that I could go there. But like so many of the things that we've been talking about, the parish was very much its own sort of self-contained unit. I was told I wasn't allowed to sing and serve and all these things, which is hard, but...
Have you heard him sing? I don't know.
No, please. I like it. I'm not good. That's okay. But what was more frustrating, because ultimately, going to church I knew was more about, being there, participating is great, but I was relatively, good, stable enough in the faith that I could still go to church and be fine. But what ended up vexing me was in a parish of about 20, the priest never once came up to talk to me. And this is very frustrating.
Sure.
When you know that certain things could be happening and they're not. It's a very simple thing. I know we've been talking about, take the initiative and go talk to the college student. We're not that bad. We're kind of interesting, Sometimes. We have majors. But we're, we can sometimes carry a conversation. And this is hard because we're people. we can, engage and be friendly back and take an interest in you as well. So these are frustrating things.
Sure.
Anyhow.
So not from my experience as a college student, but from my experience as a lay chaplain in an OCF chapter for a while. One of the pastoral care classes that we had in seminary, I was assigned to a university in the Boston area. And, because again, I think it's worth sort of saying out loud, one of the challenges that chapter had at that particular time was with the spiritual advisor. And again, I don't say this in a spirit of negativity, but just I think it's helpful for us to sort of, own and repent of these things, right? That you had this group of kids, like one example, we're sitting there, we're having sandwiches, we're having a conversation, the spiritual advisor walked in like 20 minutes late to the meeting and then proceeded to just sort of like talk at us for the next 45 minutes and then just like left. And like there was this very sort of like, intimacy sort of building, vulnerability. He just kind of comes in, throws a bomb, just kind of talks and then leaves. The students at one point were asking for services, right? There's like a little sort of non-denominational chapel there. They're like, can we do supplication services? He's like, no, you have to come to me. It's like, nobody has a car though. Can you please do this? Like, no. So it was these very these moments of attempted outreach that really felt to both the college students and me as the non-college student who was there with them, like felt like these doors were being sort of closed in their faces, right? And that's hard. I think that's hard for somebody who like is legitimately in the midst of the difficulty of college, making this attempt to reach out and having attempts at community or attempts even at worship, being frustrated. So again, it's stuff for us to think about, right? It's stuff for us to think about.
So I went to college close to home, but I lived on campus, and so my relationship with my home parish was, there was a part of me that, didn't want to see my parents every weekend, and my cousins and everyone who was there. Like I wanted to kind of assert my independence in some way. And so, I think that, that's just a personal challenge that I went through. But what I will say, so my first year out of college, and I just think this has to do with like parish engagement, you're close enough to the college age, I'll share. One thing that's fascinating is one parish I went to in the Boston area, there was actually this woman who was so eager to get me involved. Like the first Sunday I was there, she went right for me and was like, oh, can you sign up for this, and this? It's Young Adult Month, da-da-da-da-da. And I was so overwhelmed. And so this is just like kind of a different example of actually like someone who was really eager to get young adults involved, but it was too much. And she didn't really like ask me who I was or what I was doing there. It was just like, oh, there's a young adult here. Let's get her involved. Let's have her hold the candle. Let's da-da-da-da-da. And it was just, so, maybe that's being a little too picky here, and I should have just been grateful that someone saw me and acknowledged me and wanted to involve me. But it also, I do think there was something to say for the fact that I almost felt like I was just like a token young adult who they were trying to get involved, as opposed to them actually getting to know me and my gifts and what I had to potentially offer the community, or what I was even doing in Boston in the first place. So that was one thing that was a bit of a deterrent in one Boston community that I experienced.
So
Orthodox
there's
community.
wrong ways of doing the right thing.
Yes, it's hard, but it takes just seeking to get to know the individual, like get to know their name. You know, what are they doing here? I really think that makes a difference. So.
Nice. Totally. My next question talks about, when you go to a parish, not just as a college student, even now, when you visit for, ministry things, or, you travel around the country, you go to different parishes, what things are done that you see that make people feel welcome? And then what things are done deliberately that you feel that they're not welcome? What things that when you go there, are they actively seeking to make you feel part of the parish?
People seeking to get to know you and introducing themselves. I mean,
right
it
now.
does really seem simple, but it makes a big difference, makes you feel less alone. I'll also say too, my experience at an Antiochian parish was so wonderful. This was the first time I had ever, as a young adult, gone to a parish where women were included in holding the candles and icons in the great entrance. And seeing that, I was actually moved to tears because as a young Orthodox woman, I saw myself kind of represented in the offering of the gifts in a really beautiful way. And that was something that made a difference for me in feeling like I was kind of seen and welcomed in the community. Even though I wasn't part of it, I was seeing someone who looked like me part of that. And so that was beautiful. I had never seen that growing up in the Greek Orthodox tradition, and then going to an Antiochian parish. It was really beautiful for me. So, and then I think one of the sisters mentioned that the other day. I thought that was really important.
I think this is maybe a good time to highlight a thing that Christina said earlier when we were talking about the names from like high school into college, because I think that the data sort of bears this out as well, that you get onto a new campus, you tend to get into kind of a rhythm in a particular community, and so again, there's like a particular window of time in which somebody's figuring themselves out, and whatever community you sort of land in tends to be the community that you're going to kind of coast through during the course of your college experience, which is the reason why when those names are gathered from like high school programs and parishes, the commitment is to try to get in contact with a college student within the first 40 days that they're on campus. Because I think so, like one of our, I think the data bears this out, and I think a challenge for us is to be hospitable when college students need that at the most, not when they've already sort of found another home and the church potentially feels like an intrusion in like sophomore or junior or senior year, but like at that moment at the very beginning when the iron is hot, when they're kind of strangers to this campus, right? And the hospitality that they're receiving is from the church. So timing does, I mean, again, it's not destiny or anything like that, but timing becomes an important consideration as well. Like when does that kind of hospitable experience, what is the hospitable experience, but also like when it happens becomes a piece of the puzzle too. And if we can do that like very early on, it actually, like the data shows that it's actually much more likely to be received and to take root in a way that it otherwise might not.
We've talked about this a little bit before, but I had the fortune of going to Alaska 2 years ago on this OCA youth project, and by far and large, the parishes that were still thriving and still doing very well, as I imagine, in the rest of the country, this pattern holds up elsewhere as well. It was most apparent, though, when someone told it to me in Alaska, was when parishes made, younger people, youth, young adults, responsible for the parish. And in many ways, at college, it's hard, and you're learning a lot, but you're getting your butt handed to you every day. It's a difficult time. And having something you can go to the parish and be responsible for, people think you're good at it, people want you to do it, they need you to do it, it's a refreshing break. Having something, you're going, you feel a part of, you're contributing, you're being very intentional and mean and having a lot of meaning in what you're doing at a parish. Always, people always really like it. I think sometimes in popular culture, responsibility is seen as a bad thing, work is seen as a bad thing, but and I'm sure there are ways that this tends to get corrupted and people tend to burn out. There are two sides to everything, but by far and large, just a little bit of work, a little bit of responsibility for the parish, even saying we need you to sing in the choir or something like that, it's a nice feeling.
Sure. We have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the other side of this, which is when you are trying to reach out to college students that are dealing with a very strong campus culture that's like very competitive, or just from me and Peter's experience in Baltimore, for example, there's a lot of students that would come from around the country to attend Hopkins. And the culture at Hopkins was like so cutthroat. They were like, we can't make an hour for church, or on the other hand, if you talk to some of the students, it was their first time away from home and they were very sheltered. And maybe they didn't know how to go to church outside of wherever they grew up and where their parents took them. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on, not students that have a spiritual reason they don't want to go to church, but there's just other forces that are really making it hard for them to transition from high school to independent adults in their new location. Yeah.
The first thing that comes to mind, when I mentioned that old lady that was there to give me a ride, right? There's a lot of college students out there who have just the logistics of transportation, which is the thing that keeps them away from the church, right? I don't have a car and there's no robust system of public transit, and I physically can't get to the church because the church is 10 miles away or something like that. That's another sign to, something we touched on earlier, that it's not just it's a community's responsibility, not just a priest's responsibility. And somebody could make a huge difference to somebody just by giving them a seat in their car, right? One of the, I mentioned yesterday, this young adult podcast that we used to do, and there's this one story, and this woman is looking back on her time in college, difficult time with her family, and she reflected very positively on the fact that there was this family that noticed her and was just driving her to church for all of the services during Holy Week, and she just had this touch point with these people 1, 2, sometimes 3 times a day, and really what they were doing was just offering her the hospitality of the passenger seat in their car, right? Purely a logistical thing. And even that little moment opened up something wonderful in her life.
I would say, especially to the point about kind of the cutthroat, really competitive college culture, which I witnessed a lot of when I was a graduate student at BC, the undergrads, oh man, so involved, just really, it was a very fast-paced kind of Northeast, culture. And I really think meeting them where they're at, which means actually going to those spaces, as Father Timothy was saying. And so I wonder, are there ways in which you make it as convenient as possible? Hey, you've got a test coming up that you got to study for. Let me just say I've got work to do. Can we can I come to, I don't know, let's go to a coffee shop and just do work together or something. And then in those, break periods where you are getting a refill or something, you can actually sit down and have a conversation about something. But just being a presence in their lives and being a Christian in all spaces, I really think making that effort to meet them can make a really big difference. And then with regard to that culture, giving them spaces, maybe opportunities to retreat. I know that that was really important for me when I was in undergrad, and I know that OCF offers those opportunities as well. But giving them time to step back, take a break from the chaos, if they're able to, once they have an established relationship with, the person who's reaching out to them, they really need it. So.
Yeah. I think it's a great answer that challenges the way that we sometimes think about ministry, right? We're kind of focused on the things that we can teach them, as opposed to maybe I can just kind of comfort somebody while they're doing their homework or something, and that's ministry.
And ultimately, you're never gonna get everyone. Sometimes, despite the best arguments, despite asking why this is and trying to accommodate things, some people will still just have their reasons. And ultimately, you can't push that.
You respect it.
Yeah, you respect it. You let them know you're there. You leave them alone, because the last thing you want to do is be really pushy and drive them away totally.
It's one of the important things about our faith, that nothing is compulsory. We do it out of our love, out of our desire. It's not like you do this or else. I mean, we don't convert by the sword. That's not our way, And so we have to be able to give people space to be able to make those choices. Yeah. Holly?
There's been great conversation about the receiving end, being hospitable to college students and young adults as they come in, and even thinking about it in terms of the student's point of view. Could you talk about that transition, that sending off? Like, you're in high school, you're in that senior year, maybe thinking about those rites of passage. Like, how do we prepare our seniors in high school to get ready to leave? Do we have, like, in-depth training or thought-provoking exercises for them to think about what they might do in college, their vocation, Crossroads, this type of thing, ascending service, making sure that we have their address and contact information. And I remember, I think it was Father Richard Petronic, his parish always provided a budget for him to go visit every single college student every year, to not on a weekend, but like at some point during their college career, they would get a visit from their home priest, and they would also get care packages from their home parish. Could you say a little bit more, like rites of passage and the preparation?
Well, I'll say something real quick. When I went to college, my grandfather, who passed away in 2010, was a very austere and even holy man. He visited Mount Athos. He read the hours every day. I wish he was alive now that I could ask him the questions that I have now as a priest that he was trying to tell me when I was 8 years old, but it just wasn't, But when my first week in college, he sent me a letter, and it wasn't like an email. It was like old-time typewriter letter. And he wasn't a very articulate person. We know that he loved us, but he wasn't touchy-feely, grandpa kind of thing. He's very, But he wrote this letter, and he expressed himself in how he wrote. And he said, "You're now entering into a world where you can do anything you want whenever you want to do it. Mom and Dad aren't there. Anything you want, good or bad, is at your fingertips, and you can do any of it." He said, "It might mean that you hang out with people who, influence you in the wrong way, and you can do anything you want." He said, "Don't forget how you were raised." He says, "Don't forget the values that were instilled in you since you were baptized." He says, "If it comes to compromising your Orthodox faith, you compromise nothing. Love, Grandpa." Right? I still have this letter as like one of my most prized possessions. And so every year when the college kids go off to college, I pull them aside and I give them a version of that speech. Let them know that we love them, we support them, but you know what you believe. You know what we've done here for the last how many years you've been here. Don't compromise on that for something that's fleeting. To remind them that what we believe is important. It's not like, whatever, Because I think one of the things that people seek when they're coming to our parishes is the stability, that we believe something in a world that just whatever, that we don't compromise on these things. And so that's something that was given to me, and I try to share with my college kids that go out, is when it comes to your Orthodox faith, you compromise nothing.
So, I realized I didn't say this last night, but the Crossroads Summer Institute is for high school juniors and seniors. So when they come, they're rising seniors in high school or rising freshmen in college. And it is kind of like Orthodox boot camp, where we talk about vocation and purpose and discernment, being a Christian in an Orthodox Christian, living out the call to love God and neighbor in all spaces. And so it definitely, we certainly, fail in many ways. Are we reaching our alums, like Dee was an alum, and it can still be really challenging, even when we feel we've, equipped them as best we can. One thing that one of my staff members said this summer to our Crossroaders as they were getting ready to leave, and I just thought this was so beautiful. He said, and this is something maybe worth, and it's kind of along the lines of what you're saying, Father Timothy. He said, as soon as you get to college, like with your roommates, with your peers, go to church that first Sunday. Say you are an Orthodox Christian. Do, like right from the get-go, as scary as it is, do your cross before you eat. Because if you start it from the beginning, then people will know, okay, we don't ask, Kira to go to brunch on Sundays because we know she's at church. It's like right from the get-go. If that person feels that they're, in a space where they're really able to do that, but just to empower them to, from the get-go, just make it, because it makes it easier for them in the long run. The other thing we do at Crossroad is we, towards the very end, we have a re-entry stage where we have them do skits. We give them different scenarios that they have to play out, oh, you're in a big college lecture with an atheist professor who's, hating on God. How would you react to this situation? And it's kind of funny when they act it out. Skits can always, take a turn. But it's, it's actually an opportunity for them to think about, what would I do in that scenario? We also do a whole slideshow presentation of all the Orthodox ministries that they can get involved in after they leave. And so we do a big plug for OCF at the end of Crossroad, and all the ministries that are involved in there. We encourage them to, check out Ancient Faith Radio and podcasts and download the Daily Readings app. I mean, small things that actually can make a big difference in allowing, Orthodoxy to be part of the rhythm of their life. We do our best to plug, Focus and just really anything that we can, OCMC, IOCC, you name it. So I do think that connecting high school seniors in particular to resources, just making it as, accessible as possible, and then just encouraging them to, be Orthodox in every space and right from the get-go.
Microphone?
Maybe to organize this in terms of the needs that we identified yesterday. A lot of this, if you think about it, are really circulating on the third and fourth need that we identified yesterday. The third being that young people need to belong to the full community of the church, and the fourth, that young people need to be empowered with a faith that makes a difference. Because what you see even in something as simple as the letter, right, that you got from your grandfather, it's the maintenance of this connection. You are a part of this thing. I am a part of this thing along with you, right? You are not somehow gone or absent. You still maintain this connection, and the things that you profess as an Orthodox Christian matter, right? The stakes are high. This matters. It has an impact in the way that you choose whether or not to how you spend your Sunday mornings, the ethical choices that you make, whatever it is. The stakes are high. And I think that's important. And to rehash a little bit of what we talked about yesterday too, you need to build those needs on the needs that came beforehand. You can't just sort of presume connection to the body of the church if that other groundwork. You can't presume that people understand the stakes if they don't have the experience of solid ministry, right? That sense of vocation that you guys do in Crossroad, for example. So hopefully by the time we get to the point where we're sending off high school students, right? Whether we're doing some sort of actual prayer for them or whatever it is, hopefully we're building on a foundation that has been steadily laid their entire life, right? If we're just panicking because suddenly these high school students are gone,
Sorry, and I just want to clarify something, because Dima, you were here with me at the table. What I meant by, at sometimes Crossroad we fail, we believe we're equipping people. I wasn't suggesting that you in any way fail, Dima. I mean, we fail in staying connected to, all of our alums and supporting them in their journey after the program. So, that's on us, not on you. I just wanted to clarify that was not, I hope I didn't. Yeah, anyway.
So much subtext.
I love you, Dima.
I was being insulted, but now I'm not. No, just to pick up on what you said, Steve, looking at what happens when you go off to college, certain ministries, saying a prayer service, that's great, but people aren't just starting life and going to college, they have the whole 18 years before that. And, where someone is with regard to their spiritual life, that's because that's where they were when they left for college, when they're starting college. And hopefully we are, trying to raise people in the faith as they're, growing up. Because very much it's when you get to college, at least at the very beginning, it's very much a continuation of where you were beforehand. So it's important to keep in mind that, you're not going to have sort of like a 14-step plan for what you're going to do to college and how you're going to be. College is not exactly like real life, but in a sense, there's a lot that you don't know. You're going to encounter experiences that, you didn't think you never dreamed of. And it's important to have sort of that formation leading in so you can come to the right answers and the right decisions as opposed to just giving people, the right answers and right decisions.
Nice. Take a question from the microphone. Very patient, thank you.
Hi. Sure. I have a question like percolating in my heart, and I don't know how it's going to come out, so I'm just going to go. Thank you for the time, because I've been thinking. Just along the lines of like feeling welcome, and I really appreciate what everyone said about like preparing people. But I've had college students come to me and say that they didn't feel welcome by the other college students that were like the ones that were doing paralysis every Friday night, and they were like the ones getting drunk every Friday night, but they still wanted to be there because they were just at a different place. And I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, and what your thoughts about, how do we make sure that we don't like high five the ones that are like staying in church through college to the point of almost like it being like something they wear on their sleeve, and start rolling their eyes at the ones that are struggling more. I feel like there needs to be, because I know some kids that won't go to college group things because their college group is making them feel like they are making them feel shame, and making them, but they need to be there, so how do we make sure the hungover kids still want to go to go to church? Because, and maybe this is speaking to some of the stuff we were talking about yesterday of making sure that like we're not creating a space where we are looking for perfection, and but this is the time where they need and I try to just like encourage. I'm so happy with like being part of OCF things and try to encourage those kids listen but I don't know if we could just I would love to hear what you have to say, Father.
Well, I think part of it is it falls on the priest to make sure that he's keeping in touch with all of them, no matter their attendance or not. He's praying for them. They still touches base, whatever else. If my presentation came across that everything is working perfectly and everyone is deified as they come to church as college students, that's not the case. But it's all kind of different levels. Sometimes we do it right, sometimes we don't do it right. Sometimes it's those college kids that encourage those guys to come with them. Sometimes they are the one that can ostracize. Our parish is pretty small, so we only have about 12 college kids that are there. So, I haven't seen that happening too much, but I can imagine in a larger parish that could easily happen. You kind of fall through the cracks. Yeah. Father?
Yeah, Father Paul Hodge. For Dimitri in particular, as a fellow Carl, I get it. I was there a long time ago, another lifetime, and there was really no transportation to the Twin Cities. There were no cell phones. We had it was called a wide area telephone service line, a Watts line, and you could get 10 minutes on a weekend to call someone for free in the Twin Cities. So there was no OCF that I had. There was nothing, no resources like that. And I don't know how I stayed connected to the church during those 4 years, except that I found out later people were praying for me. And so that explained why I felt compelled to get up early in my freshman year. And we had this closet door that kind of folded to the side, and so it made this little triangle space, and I could literally go in my closet with my little red prayer book. So my roommate, who was like a very vocal atheist, wouldn't be on my case, Or then I used to refuse to wear spring clothes until after Holy Thursday. So one year it was really hot, and it was late Pascha, and I'm wearing a black turtleneck and a tweed jacket, and my friends thought I was a nut, because I was. But, we don't compromise, But that doesn't mean that I wasn't hungover on Sundays, and my point is not about me. Who cares about me? But my point is the fact that this part of this ministry is also the intercession for those who are in college, And the angels and the saints will minister to them when we're not able to, so.
One thing that we do in our parish I didn't mention is that every liturgical service, the college students are mentioned by name in the litany of fervent supplication. They're listed. So even if they're not there, they're still prayed for. One more question. We got about a minute before Holly gets the hook on me.
Thank you. Sorry. The last two questions I think actually fit really well together. Katrina's question about the sort of superficiality of identity that we sometimes have in the church, as if like showing up for church by itself is a success, which doesn't make room for people who have superficial failure. Like the church becomes this place where struggle is not welcome because we have the kind of the shiny veneer. Like I think that question actually like touches on with yours, right? Because the thing that we forget sometimes is that the church is not merely a human institution, right? Like these get to questions I think of organizational culture, like that Father Cosma was talking a little bit about yesterday, like not ethnic culture, but just kind of the lived experience. Like I gave a presentation to the Synod of Bishops of the Greek Archdiocese, and the question of it was like, do our ministries make sense without God? And I think a lot of times they do, right? A lot of times they do. Because even that sense of the shiny, happy people, as being like the outcome of this, right? The people who have this veneer of success, which makes like struggle a thing that happens outside the church, right? Like that's a very like human-centered organizational sort of reality, right? We forget that we like our identity, right? Second of the 5 needs that we talked about yesterday, that our identity is grounded in Christ, and our identity is this tension between like being forgiven and loved and yet chief among sinners. Right? And that there is this supernatural dynamic to this, that at the end of the day, it's more than just the experience of a retreat, it's more than the experience of even a life-changing program, right? It is like he sees us first, right? And he enters into our hearts first, right? And ideally we love him as he loves us. And if we can internalize that, that this is not just like, an Elks Lodge or a sort of, like a human-centered club, then I think that is I think that's the thing that's necessary for us to sort of realize, like, that that slogan that we talk about so often but don't actually believe, that the church is a hospital for sinners. Like, yeah, like if you're struggling, like this is where you struggle, But we don't make room for that when it becomes about sort of posturing and lies and like social cachet, as opposed to vulnerability, right? And openness to the transformation that only God can offer us, right? Which gets into all sorts of sociological things about like our conception of the self and whatever. I'm not going to get into that now, but yeah, I think those two questions go really well together.
Yeah, and on just a practical note to the intergenerational ministry presentation, having like 5 fans for every young person, I think it's really important that like college students in particular have multiple people who have different lived experiences of orthodoxy, that they might feel more comfortable going to the young adult woman to say like, hey, this is what happened last night, I'm really struggling. They may feel more comfortable. Like, I just think having a wide variety, like a spectrum of Orthodox cheerleaders who see them, who hear them, because we need people for all different reasons. You need your spiritual father for a certain reason. You need the cool, female counselor for a particular reason. You need, et cetera. So just having lots of people out there who can really just meet them where they're at and by no means enforce any sense of like shame or guilt. I think that's really important, because that can be a huge deterrent to a person's relationship with Christ, really.
Holly, what's the word?
Yeah.
Sure, go for it.
It's not really a question, it's more of an observation. For the last 4 or 5 years, I've observed something in the church I was at, Colorado, and now we've moved to Wichita and observed it there, and that is that on the Sunday of Orthodoxy, we have 40 or 50 children carry the icons up to the front of the church. And my wife always cries at this, because we see the future of the church, coming forward, and it's a very innocent thing, and they walk forward and they're holding the icons. And she cries a few weeks later when at high school graduation there's 3 or 4 kids that show up. And I guess my question is, I've really appreciated this whole weekend as we've reflected on kind of leadership and transitions, but one thing I've often wondered, and I haven't really ever found a great answer, and that is, have we really picked the right assessment? So even this weekend, we've talked a lot about 60% leave when they leave home, 60% or more fail to engage in the church. And I guess one of my questions is, are we actually looking at the wrong assessment? In my mind, even practically, I'm a 3rd and 4th grade Sunday school teacher, and we have a full classroom. Again, by the time they get to their senior year, there's 3 or 4 that show up. And I've just wondered, we're so focused on this leaving during college, but my experience and anecdotally as I've kind of witnessed the church is that actually I think most of the children are internally leaving maybe at age 13 or 14. And I just have wondered if we're so focused on an external marker, this idea that we can track, college students that depart, and I've just wondered if we're kind of distracted with something that's actually not maybe the accurate thing that we should be concerned with, and that is this internal movement that we've witnessed from maybe age 13 through 18. And so I guess that was one question. Is there a more accurate assessment of what we should be looking at as a church? And then secondly, how can we focus more on that internal movement rather than the external? So just some observations, but kind of what I've experienced. So thank you.
Thank you.
Are we taking answers, or have a response to that if we want, if there's time? Is there time? So one time I was at Antiochian Village, and I was getting ready to give a talk at college conference. And I always get jittery before talks. I was wandering around the library, and there was a beautiful new painting that had been placed there in the library. It was a painting of the martyrdom of St. Ignatius of Antioch. And if you ever go to Antiochian Village, it's a lovely painting. You see like the saint in the arena, and like his face is shining. He's looking up with this like trust to heaven, and it's like the moment when the beasts are beginning to tear open his flesh. And I'm sitting there, right, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to give this talk to college students right now. And it occurred to me, like, what if that was the goal of ministry, right? What if the goal of ministry was preparing people who, if ever called upon, would be willing to, like, stare down the gullets of lions and tigers rather than betray their Lord, right? Because we so often spend time like preparing our kids to be doctors and lawyers and accountants and whatever it is, and we so often prepare our kids to be sort of like respectable members of society who wear the right clothes and sort of act the right way in public. But that deeper sort of sense of like actual faith, right, of our hope being in the kingdom as opposed to our hope being in the kingdoms of men. Because you think about the Sunday of Orthodoxy too, which is a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. I think one of the reasons that we have kids do this is because it's like a cute photo op, right? And we don't actually expect our kids to be like living icons or carrying icons on a daily basis, right? It's just this thing that's adorable. Look at all the kids sort of tottering around, right? But that has no sort of like larger impact in their life. So by the time they're seniors in high school, right? Like what's expected of them as kids in the church? Like smile, look cute, right? And that's all. As opposed to like, what if this was important enough that you might have to die for this one day? Or what if this was important enough that you might have to like give away all of your possessions one day? Or what if this was important enough for you that you might have to like walk away from a lucrative career one day? Like all of the things that we think about as success for our kids, which are just like this world centered, right? I think Father Cosma yesterday talked about I forget how he phrased it. Do you remember how he phrased it? He was talking about like people tend to be committed to things that demand much of them. If the only thing that the church is demanding of us is to sort of like smile and hold an icon once a year, like no wonder, right? So I don't know, like go and look at that painting. Like look into the eyes of St. Ignatius and wonder like, is that actually what you want for your kids? If you were like Saint Sophia and you saw your 3 kids being martyred, like, would you be like, no, I wanted you to be a doctor, right?